Hi everyone, this is Dr. Mike, host of the free iTunes podcast, Psychiatric Secrets Revealed with Dr. Mike, but that's not why I'm here today. This is another Saving Savvy episode, and this time we're going to look at some real photos from the Sony A3000 NEX style camera. So this is a camera that is very inexpensive. It came out as an inexpensive camera, and now you can get some super deals on it. Please see some of my other videos on this camera. You just go to my YouTube channel, and there's a couple of them. But we're going to look at some JPEG images. Now, I know there's always those people out there that go, learn how to do RAW. You know, doing RAW is not like learning how to play the violin. You just put the camera on RAW, and then you have to process the images in something like Lightroom or Aperture or whatever, right? It's not that complicated. I prefer to use JPEG because of the workflow and because I'm not a professional photographer. I will tell you that I do use RAW in situations that call for it. And I also have some videos on using RAW and when I would use it and that sort of thing. So kick back and relax. These are JPEGs. This is done in the vivid color setting, most of these, because these are landscapes. I went to one of our local parks just down the street from me and took a bunch of pictures. And the one thing to warn you people that are not from a temperate climate, you're going to see a lot of trees that don't have any leaves on them. Why is that? Because this is fall, and in fall, unless you have an evergreen tree up where I live, the leaves start to fall off. So some of the trees will have green leaves, some of them will be turning yellow and other colors, and some trees will be bare, but that's the reason why. So let's move into our shots and learn more about the image quality of the Sony A3000. So let me get into it right now. Okay, this is just a shot using the standard 18 to 55 millimeter lens that comes with it, and this is showing you at 18 millimeters, and let me kind of get into my info here. And so that is roughly the equivalent, and of course I can't find it, of 27 millimeters. And now we're going to move up to the 55 millimeter position just to give you an idea of how telephoto that is. That in reality would be 82 millimeters and 35 millimeter terms. So now I'm going to show you some pictures that are both in portrait and landscape, just because people take both of those types of pictures. These are mostly landscape type pictures. So this picture here really shows off the sensor. This is just a scene from the park. Sky looks beautiful, the colors are rich, the detail is great, there's good tonal range, nothing to complain about. And here we have the same spot in a landscape view. Of course, landscapes typically look better in landscape view, so this looks better. But here again, you can see this really looks like a DSLR. There's no question about it. So let's look at the macro capabilities of this camera. And we're going to first just get it as close as possible at the 18 millimeter range. And you can see that it does a nice job taking a very sharp and clear image of this wildflower. I don't know if this is a thistle or what it is. It's very prickly, but I think it's very beautiful. And they grow all over the place, typically in late summer and early fall up where I live. So now let's move to the other end of the spectrum, the 55 millimeter end of the stock lens, and you can see we of course got closer and we have more bokeh or bokeh in the background. Pretty creamy looking, not bad at all, and I think the lens does an amazingly good job at creating a sharp and clear image on that flower. Just for fun, here's another macro shot using the 55 millimeter end. Again, that's the equivalent of an 82 millimeter on a 35 millimeter or full frame sensor. And you can see that these are little tiny wildflowers. That the flower at about 1 o'clock is very tack sharp. The one at around 7 o'clock is reasonably sharp, and all the rest have fallen into blur just because the depth of field is so shallow. Okay, so now we're going to move on to some more kind of scenery shots. I put this one in because it has a lot more of the gold and brown and orange tones in it. You can see some of our poor little trees, they've lost their leaves. And if we go off to the landscape mode, this is basically the same shot. Just looks very pretty. The sky looks nice, and the foliage looks very pretty, and very, it has lots of detail because of that 20 megapixel sensor that's APS-C sized. Well, I wanted to try the flash out in an unusual way, and so this is a photo. I'm in the woods. See, in the Midwest, we would not say that I'm going into the woods. We would say I'm in the wood, which would be a small patch of woods. So that's what we would do. So I'm in the wood, and this is without the flash. I'm just kind of on the edge looking in at this tumbled set of logs, and looks okay. But I wanted to see how the flash performed, and that's this next shot. And it did a really nice job. I mean, it didn't overexpose anything. It just gave a subtle little bit of light and depth to the rest of the area, and I thought the flash worked quite well. So here's a shot, again, in the wood, using just the normal settings on the camera, and you can see that it looks kind of pretty typical. The trees themselves, the trunks look very dark. There's not a lot of dynamic range. And so I thought I would try the in-camera HDR. And I'm actually taking 3 shots that are 2 stops up and 2 stops down. So quite a big range. And then the camera is combining them all together into this shot, which I think looks pretty awesome. So this does not look, at least in my eye, fake or over-processed, and really brings out the detail of those trees and the forest and everything. And so I thought the in-camera HDR was just excellent. Now here's a picture that I took that's kind of interesting. So I'm shooting deliberately up into the sun, and I'm expecting lens flare. This chromatic kind of aberration part, these purple streaks in the flare, is something that I'm not that familiar with seeing, and I'm assuming it's because this particular stock lens does not have some super duper coating. Of course, I was using a lens hood when I was taking these pictures, but you get that kind of purple kind of thing going on. So I just put it in here for your knowledge. Here's another portrait style photo. I honestly put it in there because I thought it was pretty, and here is the landscape version of it, but it really does show the kind of, you see the blue water, you see the blue sky, the greens look really nice and green, there's a lot of leaves that have good definition, and so that's why that's in there. I just kind of like the way it looked, really. Here's a standard shot of a shelter that's in this little park that's by my house. And so this is just using, I think we're in the vivid mode, which would be just a film style that you can pick. And so that's what that looks like. Looks just fine to me. I'm going to go now up and do a crop of the branches to see if there's any fringing. And really, there is no fringing that I can detect when you go up in these high contrast areas. So now I'm going to shift to the black and white mode, the black and white film simulation, which I think looks quite good indeed. This is at an ISO of 100, 1/200th of a second, f11 at 30 millimeters, as most of these are going to be. So that looks just fine. Now you have these filters, like most cameras do, that will do other things, and so one of them is called rich black and white, which is this one right here, which adds a lot more tonal range to your black and white film, and I could see this really being a useful filter in the right circumstance, and certainly added a lot of tonal range even to this photo here. There's also another filter called high contrast, which is this one here, which basically is high contrast. Less impressed by this filter. Maybe there's a better use for it. This particular filter is called HDR painting, and it's in the mild mode, and I love this filter. I just love it. I can't tell you. It looks rich and beautiful and warm, and I'm just crazy about it. And I think it's because it reminds me of postcards that you would see like from the 1960s, which were a little bit over the top. Wish you were here, and it'd show the beach or the forest or whatever, and this reminds me of that. But I just love the way that it renders this particular scene. There's a lot of other filters. I'll show you a few more just for fun. This is the retro filter. It's basically putting a sepia wash over the over the image, also toning down the blues a little bit and pushing up the exposure a little bit, giving you that faded look that you might see if you looked at like a Instamatic picture that's 20 years old. And of course you have the obligatory toy camera where you get the vignetting and the sides and really the little more harsh look to the image. This is not my favorite version of toy camera. Probably my favorite, and some of my favorite filters come from the Olympus line of cameras. I think they have awesome filters. These are all fine and good, but they're just okay, with the exception of that HDR painting mild, which was just awesome. So I drove my daughter to some place, and I had her turn and took a picture of her with natural light just to show you what skin tones look like. So she just took it looking at me and smiling, and I gave her a surprise. I took a picture of her. And since I was in the car, I decided to do some cheesy high ISO shots. So this is a ISO or ISO of 1600. It looks perfectly good. Here we go up to an ISO of 3200. Again, perfectly fine as far as I'm concerned. Again, these are all JPEGs, so they're being processed. Here's an ISO of 6400 at 1/800th of a second at 25 millimeters, f8. Again, looks pretty good. I think it looks just fine. I would be happy to use that picture. We get up into 12,800, and you probably won't be able to see this on your YouTube screen, but there's a ton of chromatic aberration, so I would not use this particular high ISO setting. I imagine if I was really desperate and had to use shoot in RAW, I could clean it up just fine, but I'm mostly a JPEG shooter, so that's the way it is. So I thought I would also show you what the telephoto lens looks like. This goes from 55 to I think 212, 220, something like that. It's a stock lens that I showed you in an earlier video. So here we're at the 55 millimeter, the widest angle for this particular telephoto lens, ISO 100, f4.5, 1/500th of a second. And now we've zoomed in to the telephoto end, and now we're at an f6.3 because of course this is not a constant aperture lens. ISO jumps up a bit to 160, and this is at 210 millimeters. So you get a nice range there, and certainly is worth the money if you are trying to take pictures of your kids and they're playing soccer or something. This shot was also taken with the 200 millimeter lens. I took it for a particular reason. Actually, I think it's a pretty shot. This is actually at let me look close, 69 millimeters, which would be the equivalent of 103 with a full frame sensor. But what I'm really trying to go for are those branches in the upper right. So if I go there, this is a crop of that. You can see that there's no purple fringing. What you probably can't see on the YouTube channel is there is a slight purplish cast to the twigs themselves. There's not fringing. That's been removed by the processor, but it couldn't. So obviously there's some heavy-duty processing going on with this lens, but a little tiny purple cast to the twigs themselves. And I thought I would try to see how the macro would look. In other words, get really up close and personal with the telephoto lens. So we're at 210 millimeters, f6.3, 1/400th of a second. It was pretty windy. This is not as sharp as the other images that I showed you close up, but that really could have just been a technique issue. It was kind of windy and I was trying to get these shots done. It was pretty cold too, but you can just look at that incredibly creamy background. It's just unbelievable. It almost looks like I have this up against some sort of photography background. And even though I'm not a wildlife photographer, I'd like to be, a bird got in my way, and so I was able to take this picture of this bird up in a tree at 210 millimeters. Again, so at 1/500th of a second, f8, ISO of 100. Did a really fine job, and the cool thing was it focused relatively quickly. So let me get out of that screen and we'll go back to me. And here I am again. So really, I would say that these lenses performed very well for their purpose. They really, I have no complaints whatsoever. The only thing that I like is having as fast of a lens as possible. So of course, that usually means you're buying a much more expensive lens to get f4 or an f2.8 lens or even lower. But these are just the standard lenses that most people would buy, and they did an excellent job. Some purple fringing in that flare shot, or I guess whatever you call it, but purple cast, and a little bit of a hint of purple on the twigs when I was using the telephoto lens, but it did get rid of the fringing around the twigs, so it's doing some processing. And I really think the in-camera HDR works really well. The fun filters are kind of just fine, but I really like that one that was the mild HDR painting. I thought that was, here's an old term from, I don't know what, 1970, the bomb. I thought it was like totally awesome. So a worthy camera of your consideration. The photos are clearly on a DSLR level. You can look at my review on the other fine points of this camera. At the price, you can't beat it. And as always, if you get some time, please give my absolutely free podcast a listen. It's called Psychiatric Secrets Revealed with Dr. Mike. It's on iTunes and other podcatching sites. And have a great day. Take care.